You wake before the bells. The air tastes of ash and salt. Somewhere beyond the walls, cannons thunder like the heartbeat of a furious god. The stone beneath your feet trembles. For 53 days, the earth itself has not stopped shaking. You are standing atop the Theodosian Walls of Constantinople. And before you stretches an ocean of tents, banners, and fire. Nearly 80,000 soldiers surround your city. They belong to a young sultan, who is only 21 years old, yet commands the most powerful artillery the world has ever seen. His name is Mehmed II. Behind you lies an empire that once ruled the Mediterranean. An empire that built churches like mountains and laws that shaped Europe. An empire that calls itself Roman. Ahead of you waits a new world. The cannons fire again. You flinch. The largest of them cast by a Hungarian engineer and dragged across miles of mud hurls. Stone balls heavier than oxen, against walls that have stood for 1,000 years. Walls that turned back Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Rus. Walls that no army had ever broken. Until now, inside the city, candles flicker in churches. In the great dome of Hagia Sophia, thousands kneel beneath gold mosaics, whispering prayers that heaven will intervene. Some believe angels will descend at the final hour. Others whisper darker rumors that God has abandoned them for their sins. And somewhere in the imperial palace, a weary emperor prepares to die. His name is Constantine XI Palaiologos. He commands fewer than 8,000 defenders. Greeks, Genoese, Venetians, merchants turned soldiers, priests carrying swords. You are one of them. You know the walls are cracking. You know relief will not come. But you also know something else. If this city falls, the last remnant of the Roman Empire dies with it. A civilization that has endured for over 1,000 years will vanish in a single dawn. So here is the question that hangs in the smoky air. How does an empire that survived plagues, crusades, invasions, and betrayal finally break? And what does it feel like, in the final hours, to watch the world you were born into disappear forever? The cannons fire again. This time, the wall collapses. Long before the cannons, there was light. At sunrise, the domes of Constantinople shimmered like a vision suspended between earth and heaven. Ships crowded the Golden Horn, their sails painted with the colors of Venice and Genoa. Spice merchants from Alexandria bargained beneath arcades. Silk from China passed through careful hands. The city breathed trade, argument, prayer, and ambition. For centuries, this was the beating heart of what its people called the Roman Empire, though others called it Byzantine. Its emperors traced their authority back to Caesar. Its laws descended from Justinian. Its faith was anchored in Orthodox Christianity, its rituals heavy with incense and chant. Power here was layered like the mosaics in Hagia Sophia. The emperor ruled by divine mandate, crowned beneath Christ's image. Bureaucrats kept endless records. Eunuchs navigated palace politics with quiet precision. Generals defended distant frontiers. And always, there were factions. Life in the city was not just marble and gold. Fishermen rose before dawn to cast nets in the Bosphorus. Bakers kneaded dough in narrow streets. Children ran beneath arches older than their grandparents' grandparents. Byzantine children roll_09 play, joyfully beneath ancient Roman arches, their laughter echoing through the historic stone structures. Monks debated theology in candlelit cells, arguing over the nature of Christ while empires shifted outside their walls. But this world had been shrinking. Centuries earlier, Arab armies had seized Syria and Egypt. Later came the Seljuk Turks, who shattered imperial forces at Mezakert. The Crusaders, summoned as allies, turned into conquerors. In 1204, Latin knights stormed the city itself, looting churches and shattering trust between Eastern and Western Christendom. For decades, the empire existed in fragments. It recovered but smaller, poorer, more fragile. By the 15th century, Constantinople was no longer the center of a vast Mediterranean realm. It was an island of stone, surrounded by rising Ottoman power. Beyond the walls laid villages and fields, once Roman, now Turkish. Across the straits stood fortresses built by a dynasty that had learned from Rome's strengths and weaknesses. The Ottomans were not merely raiders, they were state builders. Their sultans fused steppe traditions with Islamic governance. They cultivated loyalty through land grants and military service. The Janissaries elite infantry, drawn from Christian boys taken in childhood, formed a disciplined corps unlike anything Europe had seen. They carried gunpowder weapons with grim determination. And at their center stood a new generation of ambition. Mehmed II had ascended the throne once before as a boy, only to be pushed aside. Now restored, he carried humiliation like a scar. He read history obsessively. He spoke multiple languages. He dreamed not of plunder, but of destiny. To him, Constantinople was not just a city. It was the key to legitimacy. The prize that would make him Caesar of Rome. In the eyes of both Muslims and Christians, the conquest would unite his territories and control trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. He understood something fundamental. Symbols matter. If the ancient capital fell, the Ottomans would no longer be a rising frontier state. They would become an empire. Inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI understood this too. He inherited a throne heavy with memory and light on resources. The treasury was thin. The countryside offered little tax. Appeals to Western Europe for aid were tangled in theological disputes. The great schism between Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism had hardened into centuries of mistrust. Desperation led to compromise. In Hagia Sophia, union with Rome was proclaimed in hopes of securing military support. Some citizens wept with relief. Others muttered that it was betrayal. Better the turban of the Turk, some whispered, than the mitre of the Pope. The city's population had dwindled drastically. Once, perhaps 500,000. It now held fewer than 50,000 souls. Entire districts lay abandoned. Gardens grew where mansions once stood. The walls remained magnificent, but manpower to defend them was scarce. And yet, there was pride. The Theodosian Walls still rose in triple layers of stone and moat. The chain across the Golden Horn could block enemy fleets. The defenders believed that if they could hold long enough, Europe might stir. In the Ottoman camp, preparation moved with ruthless efficiency. Cannons were cast on an unprecedented scale. Logistics were organized. Roads were cleared to transport massive bombards. Diplomacy ensured neighboring states would not interfere. When Mehmed II ordered the siege in April 1453, it was not a reckless gamble. It was the culmination of decades of Ottoman consolidation and centuries of Byzantine contraction. But beyond the strategies and treaties were human lives. A Genoese commander named Giovanni Giustiniani arrived with experienced troops, lending hope to the defense. Artisans repaired breaches under fire. Women carried stones to reinforce barricades. Priests moved among soldiers, offering absolution. Outside, janissaries sharpened blades. Imams preached that the Prophet had foretold the conquest of this city. Soldiers listened with a mixture of zeal and fear. The siege was not simply an army attacking a city. It was two worlds colliding. One ancient and exhausted, the other young and hungry. Each dawn brought cannon fire. Each night brought repair. Smoke drifted over domes. Ships attempted to break the blockade. In a daring maneuver, Ottoman forces dragged vessels overland into the Golden Horn, bypassing the defensive chain. When citizens awoke to see enemy ships, where none should be, dread settled deep. Hope flickered, but the circle tightened. Constantinople had survived so much, but survival is not infinite. As weeks dragged on, exhaustion became a weapon. Ottoman cannons pounded relentlessly, shaking the ancient walls. The Great Bombard, nicknamed the Basilica, cracked stone with terrifying rhythm. Each impact sent shards flying like lethal rain. Defenders rushed to plug breaches with timber, earth, and sheer bodies, their faces grim with determination. Mehmed II watched from a raised platform, studying weaknesses. He was patient, but not passive, always seeking an advantage. He ordered assaults to test resolve. Waves of irregular troops surged forward, absorbing arrow fire and gunshot. Behind them, disciplined janissaries waited for the decisive moment, their resolve unwavering. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI moved constantly along the walls. He spoke to soldiers by name when he could. He shared their rations. His authority was no longer imperial pageantry. It was proximity, a shared struggle. He knew morale was as fragile as mortar, constantly threatened by the relentless siege. Giovanni Giustiniani commanded the most critical sector near the gate of St. Romanus. His experience was invaluable, yet tensions simmered between Latin and Greek defenders. Old resentments lingered beneath cooperation. Every decision carried political weight, adding to the immense pressure on the city's leadership. The Ottomans attempted tunneling operations, digging beneath the walls to collapse them from below. Byzantine engineers countermined, fighting in suffocating darkness underground, a silent, deadly war. Men grappled with daggers in tunnels barely wide enough to breathe, a brutal, desperate struggle. Time favored the besiegers. Supplies dwindled. Casualties mounted, and hope began to fade. Rumors spread faster than arrows. Some claimed Venetian fleets were on the way, a beacon of false hope. Others insisted they had been delayed. Every sail glimpsed sparked hope, then crushing disappointment. Mehmed adapted relentlessly. When direct assaults failed, he intensified bombardment, showing his strategic genius. When naval blockade faltered, he reinforced it. He studied the city's patterns, searching for fatigue. And fatigue was everywhere, a silent enemy eroding the city's last defenses. On May 29, 1453, before dawn, the final assault began. Drums thundered across the Ottoman camp. Torches flickered like a constellation descending upon earth. The first wave attacked, then the second. The defenders held, blood slick on stone, fighting with desperate courage against overwhelming odds. Constantine fought in armor, indistinguishable from his men, a true leader in the thick of battle. Then came the Janissaries, disciplined, silent, advancing in tight formation, an unstoppable force. At the critical moment, Giustiniani was gravely wounded. Carried from the wall, his departure rippled through the ranks. Confidence faltered, replaced by a growing sense of dread and impending doom. A small postern gate, whether left open or forced, allowed Ottoman troops to penetrate deeper. Panic ignited, spreading like wildfire through the streets of the besieged city. Constantine XI removed his imperial insignia. He is said to have cried that the city was lost and charged into the fray. His body was never conclusively identified, lost in the chaos of the city's final moments. By mid-morning, Ottoman banners flew atop the walls. The unthinkable had happened. A new era had begun. The city that called itself Rome had fallen, forever changing the course of history. When the gates opened, chaos rushed in. For 3 days, according to custom, the conquering army was permitted to loot. Soldiers poured through streets once lined with philosophers and merchants. Doors splintered. Families hid in cellars. Some fled to churches, believing sacred walls might shield them. In Hagia Sophia, thousands gathered. The vast dome echoed with prayers. When Ottoman troops entered, fear froze the air. Icons were torn down. Gold was stripped. The transformation of the cathedral into a mosque began almost immediately, though Mehmed himself would later order protection for the structure. Not all was indiscriminate slaughter. Mehmed understood the value of the city. He sought to claim it, not reduce it to ash. He rode through its streets, reportedly in awe of its grandeur. He declared it his new capital. Constantinople would become Istanbul. Survivors faced stark choices. Some were enslaved. Others were ransomed. Artisans and scholars were resettled to repopulate the city. Mehmed invited Christians and Jews to return under Ottoman rule, offering a measure of religious autonomy within the millet system. For many, grief settled like dust. The empire was gone. The emperor dead. The liturgy silenced in its greatest church, yet life did not end. Markets reopened. Mosques rose beside churches. The call to prayer joined the bells that still rang in smaller sanctuaries. Greek communities adapted, preserving language and faith under new sovereignty. In Western Europe, shock reverberated. The fall was interpreted as divine judgment, geopolitical disaster, apocalyptic sign. Refugee scholars carried Greek manuscripts westward, contributing to intellectual currents that would later be called the Renaissance. Trade routes shifted, with Ottoman control over eastern Mediterranean corridors. European powers intensified efforts to find alternative paths to Asia. Maritime exploration accelerated. Within the city, children grew up knowing only Ottoman rule. For them, the conquest was origin, not catastrophe. Empires do not simply vanish, they transform, absorbed into new structures. The stones of Constantinople remained, but their meaning had changed. Return to the wall. Imagine the moment just before it broke. An empire can appear, eternal, its rituals ancient, its monuments indestructible. Yet fragility often hides beneath ceremony. Demographic decline, economic strain, political division, over-reliance on past glory. Constantinople did not fall in a single morning. It fell over centuries of contraction, compromise, and missed adaptation. Mehmed II did not win by chance. He prepared, studied, innovated. He understood that technology, logistics, and symbolism could bend history. Today, the skyline of Istanbul still carries layers of that turning point. Hagia Sophia has shifted identities more than once, reflecting the tides of power and belief. The Bosporus still channels ships between continents. The questions that echoed in 1453 remain. How resilient are our systems? How deeply do we rely on inherited strength? What happens when rising powers master new tools, while established ones cling to old certainties? The fall of Constantinople was not merely the death of an empire. It was the birth of another, and a reminder that history is movement. Somewhere, even now, walls are trembling. The cannons may sound different, The banners may bear new symbols, but the human experience, fear, ambition, faith, survival remains unchanged. The dawn always comes. The question is, who will still be standing when it does?